The city of Baltimore is considering using pandemic relief funds to pay for lawyers for tenants so they can fight their eviction process. They call it right to counsel. But at the same time, right to counsel may actually lead to more homelessness. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have two interesting articles for you today, and they're going over the topic of right to counsel, which is basically when the city or the municipality or state is paying for lawyers so the tenants can fight their eviction cases. Okay, so this is basically so all tenants can have legal representation when they're in eviction court. The only problem is that they're paying for the tenants' lawyers and they're not paying for the landlord lawyer. So we have cases where you have tenants who are rightfully being evicted, and then you have these lawyers in place and they are, filing motions, spinning wheels, and doing everything possible to keep a bad tenant in a property. And that's just not right, okay? Now, it's not an even playing field when you're talking about, well, we're paying for a lawyer for this group, this party over here, and not for this party over here. This party over here got to pay for their own lawyer. As though in every situation the landlord is the bad guy and the tenant is the good guy. And I don't like the way that works, okay? In my opinion, if you want a lawyer, you have to pay for it yourself. They never even ask if, hey, does the tenant actually need the government to pay for a lawyer? Okay, or are they capable of paying for their own? No, they just assume that all tenants are, destitute and broke if they're facing eviction, and therefore they deserve a lawyer. It's a ridiculous policy. It's overreach, in my opinion. Okay, now, and it basically has actually caused homelessness, according to the second article that I have. But what do you think? Before I get into these two articles, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think, okay? Do you think that these right to counsel, these paying for these lawyers for these tenants, do you think that actually could possibly be leading to additional homelessness? After reading the second article, I definitely do, okay? And I see exactly the point that they're trying to make. And I'm going to cover that, but let's get into the first article first. And it's coming from MarylandMatters.org, and it says, housing advocates urge Baltimore to use relief funds for tenants' access to counsel in eviction cases. The relief fund should be going to the landlords, okay? That's it. Pay them the money that they are owed. Don't use it to pay lawyers. Baltimore became one of only a few local governments in the country to guarantee tenants the legal right to counsel in eviction cases last year. Now, fair housing advocates say city officials should use funds from the Federal American Rescue Plan Act to pay for the right to counsel. While the right to counsel legislation was approved in late 2020, it hasn't been fully funded and is slated to be implemented over the next 4 years. Advocates from the Baltimore Renters United Coalition previously estimated that implementing the right to counsel in eviction cases will cost the city roughly $6.8 million, but could be offset by state or federal funding and would save the city money in the long run by preventing homelessness. Yeah, and this is a big cost, okay? And keep in mind, these pandemic relief funds, they're temporary, okay? So this city's going to be continually paying for these lawyers, and the landlords are going to be continually suffering because, you know what? It doesn't matter if the tenant paid rent, didn't pay their rent, destroyed the property or not. They're going to have a lawyer up there representing them. And instead of getting them out in a short period of time, now they could drag it out 6 months, a year, longer. Who knows? I don't know how long it takes to evict a tenant in Baltimore right now. But as far as I know, Baltimore is a very, very anti-landlord, pro-tenant place. So, getting paid lawyers for all the tenants on top of this could make it even worse. Now, fair housing advocacy groups, including Jews United for Justice and the Public Justice Center, say Baltimore Mayor Brandon M. Scott should dedicate at least 20% of the $641 million from the American Rescue Plan Act to prevent evictions, including $12 million to fund the right to counsel program. A study of eviction cases in Baltimore by the Chicago-based consulting firm Stout found that 96% of landlords have legal representation during eviction cases in Baltimore, and just 1% of tenants do. Stout found that tenants with legal representation are more likely to avoid disruptive displacement. Yeah, and they're right. 96% of landlords do have legal representation. But you know who pays for it? They do. Okay? When I evict a tenant, I have to pay for it out of my own pocket. And it's thousands of dollars. Okay, so then you're going to give this $1,000, multiple $1,000 free lawyer to this tenant who, didn't even pay me. And now they get to stay for even longer because their lawyer's filing ridiculous continuances and motions and trying to stop them from getting evicted when they didn't pay me or they broke the terms of the lease, and I'm in the right, and then now they get to stay for even longer. I mean, that's ridiculous. Okay, so I'm on the side of in the name of fairness, the person on each side should have to pay for their legal representation if they want it. Now, a lot of landlords in where I'm from, they will actually go to court and represent themselves because it's not that difficult of a process. But there's also a lot of landlords who pay lawyers. Now, I personally pay a lawyer because, one, I don't have time to go down to housing court, and do any of this. Two, I invest out of state, so, there's really no way that I can go down to Kansas City where my duplexes are at and go to housing court if I need to evict somebody. But, a lot of landlords do represent themselves. So you're going to have situations where you have a landlord who's representing themselves, and maybe they can't afford an eviction attorney. And meanwhile, the state government or the city government is paying for the tenant to have a lawyer. And that's an unfair situation as well. So yeah, like I said, if they're going to implement this sort of law, they need to pay for lawyers for both sides. Just saying that one side happens to have a little bit more money, so we're going to pay for a lawyer for them. That's not right. That's punishing those who, work hard and are able to afford a lawyer. I mean, come on. Detrice Dowridge, the president of the Right to Housing Alliance and a member of the Baltimore Renters United Steering Committee, said tenants need legal counsel in eviction cases sooner rather than later. Dowridge said funding the right to counsel for tenants will create an even playing field in court. No, it won't. She said tenants face barriers to showing up to fight an eviction case when they don't have access to reliable transportation or childcare, and they may struggle to raise a defense, like proving a landlord didn't make necessary repairs without legal counsel. Yeah, well, what about the landlord might have issues with childcare too? They never talk about that, okay? As though landlords aren't people, as though every landlord is just some faceless corporation somewhere, okay? We might have issues with childcare. We might have issues with transportation just as easily as the tenants do. As I've said before, most landlords are middle class, and there's actually a lot of lower income landlords as well. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. And their assertion that it's going to, decrease homelessness, well, that's completely false. And I've got proof of this. And we're going to go straight into my second article now, and it's coming from Reason.com. And it says, when lawyers make things worse, the housing edition. A study suggests that right to counsel in eviction cases actually leads to greater homelessness. Yeah, and this is something that I've been talking about for a long time, okay? Whenever you put more rules, regulations, etc. on tenants, the repercussion is that landlords have to increase their screening criteria, increase their prices. If I have to pay a bunch of lawyers thousands of dollars to fight against your lawyers, guess what? My rents at all my properties are going to go up. And that is the exact result, and that means that you're going to have a harder time finding affordable housing. And in many cases, you're not even going to be able to find housing, which means that could lead to homelessness. But let's see what the article says. And I'm going to skip over some of it because I don't want to read the all of the detail, but let's see here. Tyler Cohen flags a working paper by Boaz Abramson that suggests that some policy measures adopted to protect tenants may actually increase homelessness. The paper, The Welfare Effects of Eviction and Homelessness Policies, looks at several policy interventions aimed to help tenants and models their effects. Here's the abstract. Okay, here we go. This paper studies the implication of rental market policies that address evictions and homelessness. Policies that make it harder to evict delinquent tenants, for example, by providing tax-funded legal counsel in eviction cases, right to counsel, or by instating eviction moratoria, protect renters from eviction in bad times. However, higher default costs to landlords lead to higher equilibrium rents and lower housing supply, implying homelessness might increase. And that is the truth, okay? So there's going to be less housing supply, meaning landlords are going to get out of the business when they have to deal with this mess, okay? And that means there's going to be less units available for rent. And the rents on the ones that are still available, they're going to go up. Okay, so this is actually going to lead to more homelessness, this right to counsel nonsense. So, let me know what your opinion is down in the comments. If you think that, right to counsel actually is a negative for the tenants as well as the landlords. That's my personal opinion. I've read so much about it, and my belief is that, continue to put so many pressures, rules, regulations, on landlords, it always has a negative effect on housing costs, and therefore it hurts tenants.